Good day, namaste, assalamu alaikum, adab, sat sri akal, whatever greetings are there in the world. I'm Ayesha Siddiqa in London today with Neighbors Talking, a program for Neador, which brings neighbors together to talk about the South Asian neighborhood, whatever interests us and whatever our concerns. Today we have as a guest Ambassador Sharat Sabarwal. He's a batch of he's a career diplomat from a batch of 1975 who has done several important stations for India. Definitely, he has been the deputy permanent representative of India in the UN in Geneva. He's been India's ambassador in Uzbekistan, and most importantly, from this program's perspective, he has been Deputy High Commissioner in Pakistan from 1995 to 1999, and then High Commissioner in Pakistan from 2009 to 2013. And I must say that the many times that I've been to dinners at Ambassador Sabharwal's place, met him. Now, it's interesting that he just didn't do a posting in Pakistan and walked away. He has brought his experiences together. Ambassador Sabharwal has this year he's published a book titled India's Pakistan Conundrum, trying to explain and understand the Pakistani state and how Indians should look at it, mainly from an Indian audience's perspective, because it explains from Pakistani state, its complexities, to explaining, and his comment is that Pakistan is not a failed or a failing state, but rather a dysfunctional state. And we would talk to him more about it. But more than that, he is talking about why Pakistan can it be isolated? And should India keep talking to Pakistan? And his advice is that India must keep talking to Pakistan. To quote from his book, he says, it's imperative that India does not leave the relationship with Pakistan in a state of free fall, counting only on military means. So he talks about greater engagement, which has been the history of the relationship between the two countries. India and Pakistan, throughout the 75 years of history, have been through ups and downs. There've been critical moments, there've been tensions, and then we've been back to the negotiating table. Now, Mr. Sabharwal, welcome to Neighbors Talking.
Thank you.
I particularly today, my context, what I really want to you to focus on today, what you have a chapter in this 18 chapter book. You have a whole chapter on trade. So, given what Pakistan is going through, the floods, devastation, uh, there are murmurs in the background, constant, that should Pakistan and India have trade relations? Is this the moment to start trade relations? So I would request you to kind of comment on that. I mean, should we have trade? How to have trade? I mean, there's skeptics on both sides, as you've mentioned in the book. I mean, more recently, I was looking at Pakistan's former High Commissioner Abdul Basid's comment to your comment that it seems that India is more keen on having trade than Pakistan. So, what is your perception in so many years in Pakistan? What did you learn? Is Pakistan keen on trade, and is India keen on trade?
Well, let me give me a few sentences at the beginning, Dr. Siddiqa, to lay out the scope of my book, to put things in perspective. As you rightly said, part one examines the nature of the Pakistani state and why I call it a dysfunctional state. And while doing so, I have looked at a few positive trends also, you might have seen, and there is a chapter called Silver
Indeed, indeed.
And I have said that the Indian policy should not ignore these trends because they may be weak, but these trends must grow if Pakistan is to become a normal state for us to normalize relationship with it. In part two, I examine key issues of the relationship, including trade, of course, and then I look at India's policy options, their potential and their limitations, both. And my broad conclusions at the end of the book are, and I will talk about diplomacy and dialogue also. Two, there is no silver bullet for India to deal with Pakistan. It has to be a combination of various instrumentalities. A. B, my conclusion is that it may not be possible. This is my assessment to normalize this relationship completely until Pakistan resolves its dysfunction. Repeated problems have arisen because of that. And if you wish, I could explain that a little later. So therefore, what I say is that instead of having very high ambitions, we shouldn't take our eye off that. If there are possibilities that emerge, we must do that also. If there are opportunities that arise, but in the meanwhile, we should focus on managing this relationship by combining deterrence with calibrated punitive approach if terrorism has to continue, but also dialogue and diplomacy. And I emphasize that dialogue and diplomacy have a role even in a very difficult relationship like this. Even if we do not have expectations of a big bang improvement in the relationship, at least dialogue and diplomacy should be deployed when possible to manage this relationship, to keep the levels of violence and volatility low. Coming to trade, Dr. Siddiqa, as you know, a lot of work was done on trade, and that's my chapter about during 2011 and 12. That is when
Right.
the government of Pakistan had moved away, a little away from its usual emphasis on linking trade to political issues. And we had advised Pakistan against doing that all along. So the net result was, A, we signed 3 agreements to address the complaints of the Pakistani business community. There were some non-tariff barriers. Actually, there were delays in Indian quality testing laboratories or customs facilitation, etc. So 3 agreements were signed. Then our commerce secretaries drew a roadmap in September 2012, under which Pakistan was to give India MFN status by December. And then there were some steps by both India and Pakistan to reduce their sensitive list under SAFTA to increase preferential trade. That didn't happen for various reasons. The relationship deteriorated. In 2019, of course, Pakistan suspended trade, and we also withdrew MFN status after Pulwama. Now, I believe that trade relationship, that roadmap is there. It can be picked up today, adapted a little, and then trade can be normalized. But I believe that it will not happen until there is this feeling in a segment of your political discourse and also in your foreign policy establishment. I must say that I interacted very closely with Pakistan's business and industrial community during my tenure as High Commissioner. And I can tell you, barring some sectors, I can recall 2 offhand, pharmaceuticals and automobiles, which stand to lose their profits, which they make if open trade starts with India. But the remaining sectors were by and large in favor of trade. So they know the realities. But it's in a section of your political discourse and the foreign policy establishment, the feeling that it's a favor to India. Let me explain why it is not a favor to India. One, when trade was suspended by Pakistan, India's exports were $2 billion to Pakistan. $2 billion. Now, $2 billion counts for little in the macro scheme of things. India's merchandise exports of $300 to $350 billion, then the service exports, etc., etc. It's neither here nor there. Secondly, more importantly, Dr. Siddiqa, look, I have a feeling, and I'm sure that Indian machinery and goods which have a price advantage are going to Pakistan, are being brought in by your business and industry through orders placed in third countries. Of course, there is a price markup. It harms the Pakistani economy. It means more price for the consumers. But it happened earlier also. It was happening on an extensive scale when Pakistan had a restrictive trade regime. Today, trade is suspended, barring, I think they are getting some pharmaceuticals, maybe some cotton and sugar, etc. So many Indian exports are going to Pakistan that way. In fact, I was told by my business friends that there were industrial units with Indian machinery which was barred for import which had been imported through third countries functioning
But
in Pakistan.
but
So
Mr.
I don't
Savarwal,
think.
let me just interrupt you for a minute. I mean,
Hmm.
would you say that there are then maybe perhaps regional lobbies, in some ways, funny ways? I mean, the Gulf states, which are a route of the transit for this transit trade between and
Hmm.
silent trade between India and Pakistan, they
Hmm.
in a way benefit much more. So
Hmm.
would you say that this is what's happening? Are these the lobbies? And in your book, you also mention lobbies in Pakistan. So what is
Yes.
happening?
That's what I was coming to. Look, you can't blame third countries for taking advantage of a situation of your own creation. If Pakistan doesn't import directly, it will come through orders placed in third countries. Maybe somebody is making money there, but you can't blame them. And Dr. Siddiqa, let me also say this. I am not saying that commercial lobbies on both sides do not have their interests. There are lobbies within India also, which has very, very keen interest in protecting their industry and so on. Now that is something which is accepted in the world of trade, and that is exactly what we tried to address in 2011 and 12. I do not have the time to explain it to you. If your listeners read the book, they would see that chapter. That's precisely what we tried to address the concerns of the Indian industry and economic segments, address the concerns of the Pakistani business and
So
industry.
very quickly, if
That
you
is,
could
that is,
point out,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
could point out very quickly, I mean, what were the few things that you did?
Look, as I explained to you, there were concerns of the Pakistani business and industry that there were some non-tariff barriers
Right.
for their exports to India. Now, they were not very clear about these non-tariff barriers. Actually, initially, my dialogue with them was dialogue of the deaf. I was saying, give us MFN status, and they were saying, remove these non-tariff barriers, but without defining what they were. Then your Commerce Ministry undertook an exercise. They interacted with Pakistani chambers of commerce. And then
Okay.
they came up with three areas. They said quality testing in Indian laboratories of Pakistani products takes too long. They are located somewhere in distant places in India. A. B. Customs facilitation. There are problems with customs at times. C. If there are any disputes arise before you go to legal mechanisms and so on, there is no mechanism at the administrative level to resolve them. So as I told you, in September 2012, we finalized and signed three agreements. One is mutual recognition of laboratories of each other, which means Pakistani
Right.
products could then be tested in Pakistani laboratories rather than in Indian laboratories. B, an agreement on customs facilitation, laying down certain procedures. And C, an agreement on constituting a body of Commerce Ministry officials of both sides to resolve disputes at the administrative level, if possible. So this is
Okay.
what we did. We got your businessmen to India in large numbers, and our trade regulators sat with them and talked to them about Indian regulations, etc. Took on board their concerns. All this work was done. A lot of work was done then. So that segment one can deal with, and one has to deal with. It's part of trade, but it is this misperception. It's an illusion to say that trade is of great interest to India because it's a favor to India. It's not a favor. I'm not saying it will not help the Indian economy, but it will help the Pakistani economy much more than the Indian economy. I have quoted a report of your own planning commission in that chapter, in the 2010 report, where it said how important it was and how open trade with India would benefit the Pakistani economy.
But interestingly, you also quote Wasim Sajjad telling your earlier High Commissioner,
Yes,
Satish Chandra,
yes.
that असूलों के लिए तो कुर्बानी देनी पड़ती है. Because
Mm,
when Satish Chandra asked him, okay,
mm, yes.
why you looking at Indian trade, from a hostile frame? So why do you think? I mean, firstly, my question is that you were largely in a period between the two political governments,
Mm.
Pakistan People's Party, 2008 to 2011, and then 2000, sorry, 2012, and then 2013 onwards. It was Mia Nawaz Sharif, Pakistan Muslim League,
Very, very
and
short. Very
yeah,
short. Nawaz
very
Sharif, I
short.
was there for 3 weeks only. Mostly
But I'm sure,
PPP though.
yeah, but I'm sure you looked at both governments how they dealt with trade. What do you think was the perspective of these political governments? How keen were they in starting
Um,
trade?
I think I have mentioned some of this. Look, the PPP government, all this work that I'm talking of was done under the PPP government in 2011 and 12. So they were well disposed on trade with India. Of course, that roadmap that Commerce Secretary had drawn in September, which was to be completed by December in terms of Pakistan giving us MFN status, that could not be completed. But there was some resistance from some lobbies within Pakistan, commercial lobbies. But my
I
information.
remember agricultural lobby had a problem.
Yes, that I have explained in my book also. Three sectors, if I may say so. One was pharmaceuticals. The other was automobiles, fat
Right.
profits, which they would stand to lose, and farming sector. Farming sector, it was never clear to me what was the source of their worry. In fact, I think your economist, I forget his name now. I have quoted him and from an article written by him those days where he said very clearly that farming lobby had nothing to worry about trade with India. It's only in a few items that there could be import and export, vegetables and some fruits and so on. And livestock, India wasn't, there was no interaction at all, and there were other sectors, forestry, etc., etc. He explained it in great detail. So farming lobby, I don't understand. Maybe there was some political content there. This whole business of linking into political issues.
Yeah, I mean, you cite in your book Sohra Imam's objection. And so
Yes.
Sohra Imam, has a particular, political inclination on these issues. But definitely, I mean, Hina Rabbani Kar in 2011 visited India, and there was a lot more communication. There was a lot more. It's interesting, and you quote in your book yourself that um, even Imran Khan and General Bajwa support the idea of trade with India.
No,
Um,
not General Bajwa. I was told by businessmen. I had no direct way of knowing that. But if you wish to
okay,
know these actors, what was there. So
right.
PPP government was favorable. Nawaz Sharif was very favorable to trade. And my last meeting with him, when he became prime minister, I raised this issue with him, and he said, "Yes, this should be done. This will benefit both sides." And he was favorably disposed towards it. My feeling during my conversations with Imran Khan also was that he was favorably disposed towards this, and in generally improving relations with India. You mentioned Hina Rabbani Kar. I think she she had a good understanding of the relationship, and if my information was correct, this wasn't direct. She had been given the task in the end when difficulties arose to talk to the stakeholders and try and resolve the problems. And I was told by prominent members of Pakistan's business community that General Kiani and the military leadership those days had been talked to by them, and it had been explained to them the imperatives and so on, that it was important for the Pakistani economy, that the army leadership had also given a nod. This is what I was told. Where this is in 2010, 11, thereabouts.
Right,
Whether
right.
that lasted later on, I don't know.
But you also write in your book that initially General Kiani and General Pasha, DJISI and Army Chief, both were in agreement, but then they backed down. Uh, so
Uh,
probably there was
oh no,
less understanding.
that's in the context of the back channel understandings. I
Right,
think
right,
we shouldn't mix it up with trade. That was in the context of back channel understanding. That was indirect information coming from American ambassadors' conversation with them, which came out through WikiLeaks, etc. Those telegrams that in their conversations with him, they said yes. They were favorably disposed, but that's the back channel, not on trade. Trade, whatever information I had about thinking of the army leadership was through your business leaders.
right. I mean, it's an excellent book, and I was going through these quotes in your book. This meeting between Nawaz Sharif, Mia Nawaz Sharif and Vajpayee Sahab, in which Mr. Nawaz Sharif tells Mr. Vajpayee a joke. Um, about and I wish if I hope if you remember it and you can you can narrate it for the benefit of our listeners, that what was that story?
Yeah, no, it was, he said a courtier in Ranjit Singh's court who was a greedy guy. And he thought of a scheme to get some money out of him. And he goes to the Maharaja and says that I saw your Abbaji in dream last night. And
Okay,
he said, you go to my son and he'll give you 100 Ashrafis.
right.
So Ranjit Singh said, but that's strange, I also saw my Abbaji in dream last night. And he said that this greedy guy will come to you, will say this, don't do that. But hit him 100 times with the jutti. You hit him 100 times.
Oh,
So the courtier said at this, you have a strange Abbaji. He says one thing to you and quite the other to
mm,
us. He stopped there, and we were all wondering what was the import of this joke to the work at hand. And then he broke the silence and he said, Vajpayee Saab, let's talk directly, because if we talk through third parties, they will tell one thing to you and quite another to us. And as I write later on, Mr. Vajpayee was himself convinced of the need of dialogue, and he continued it despite many provocations. It is from the Pakistani side that this voice came time and again for involvement of Western countries, notably the United States. But I think Mr. Vajpayee he stayed with his approach of dialogue and trying to resolve issues, although he faced many hurdles and provocations, including
but
Kashmir.
yeah, but and with great foresight, to keep talking. Why do you think we can't talk now? I mean, now and then, I mean, I would hope that the present moment and the crisis in Pakistan would, compel both sides to start direct talks that we don't have. We don't have people to people dialogue either.
Look, if I look at things on our side, I don't know the mind of the government. I am not I have nothing to do with the government now for a long time now. Uh, we had this, terror and talks cannot go together, which caught public imagination in the run up to the 2014 election, because there's a lot of anger on terror attacks which had continued, especially the horrendous Mumbai attack. But I must say that the government, even the new government, Mr. Modi's government, uh, didn't follow it uniformly. They did talk. He invited Nawaz Sharif, amongst others, for his swearing in. And there was dialogue
Right.
then. Continued, I think, for between foreign secretaries.
And Mr. Nawaz Sharif went.
He went. He went, yes. That was a very good thing to do. And then talks continued somehow or the other, one way or the other. And then I remember our External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj going to Pakistan towards the end of 2015, when it was decided to resume dialogue, structured dialogue. Then Mr. Modi took this bold step of making a short halt in Lahore. I think that was a good thing. I supported it regardless of what happened later on. But then you know what happened later on. Within days, attack in Pathankot, then terrorism picked up, and then Uri attack, and then the relationship nosedived. So on our side, there is this this issue which is there. But if you ask me about our government's thinking, look, I don't think Pakistan is on the top of their diplomatic agenda. They have many other urgent foreign policy issues to attend to. But my feeling, my belief is that they would not be averse to bringing a little greater stability to the relationship, in addition to what happened as a result of restoration of ceasefire in February 2021, which was also, if we believe the reports in the media, the result of dialogue between heads of our intelligence agencies somewhere in a third
Certainly,
country.
certainly.
But dialogue nonetheless. So this is my feeling on our side. But the problem now is mainly on the Pakistani side for two reasons. I'm giving you my assessment. A
Sure.
is your fractious political atmosphere, where, I think it's difficult for any prime minister, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif today, to take the smallest positive step towards India, lest it be described as a sellout by Imran Khan today. So that kind of environment, I see doesn't leave much room for rational choices, or even if there are compulsion. Look at this vegetables import issue. It makes straight sense, and I find it really strange when somebody, senior from your political side or foreign policy establishment says India is interested. India is not interested in exporting vegetables in particular. They are consumed within India. And look, I am not saying it's one-sided. I have known situations in the past when we had shortage of vegetable, and I used to get frantic calls saying, "Get them from Pakistan." Made it was a matter of common sense. The second, if you give me a moment, is the stand that Pakistan took after we withdrew the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. That stand, I think, is painted, again, my assessment, Pakistan into a very tight corner from which it's very difficult to get out. Let me explain. A, suspension of trade, which hurts the Pakistani economy more than it hurts India. B, a demand to resile or cancel that step. If you ask me for my assessment, no government of India is going to withdraw it now. That step which was taken. Nobody is going to
So
back
you're
down.
suggesting that any trade talks that we have will
Mhm.
have to then kind of step away from Kashmir issue? Is it what you're suggesting?
Well, that was our advice to Pakistan always. I don't know. I do not talk on behalf of the government. They may have their own position, but my own assessment is that trade should never be linked to political issues. Trade and economic cooperation should never be linked to political issues. Of course, there are people on our side who would say, if terrorism continues, why do you even have trade with Pakistan?
Can
There
I
are
can I
there are those kind
can
of
I
voices. Yes.
uh, Mr. Sabwal, can I ask you this very naughty question, which is that do you think that continued aid from the West or from rest of the world, does it make Pakistan look at trade with India or other kinds of relationship with India as secondary, not important?
Look, it's a fact that your treaty relationships, and all this kind of assistance, existing on what others are giving you. That before I come to Pakistan's relationship with India, that has also made it difficult for Pakistani governments to realize what they need to do in terms of being self-sufficient. Raising more revenues, cutting down expenditure, etc., etc. That's internally. So your internal orientation has continued the same way because of this. And I would say that these treaty relationships, etc., also encourage Pakistan to continue with its adversarial relationship with India, and sometimes, entailing some very irrational things like suspending trade or not having trade with India. That's a fact. So, in my view, linking trade to political issues doesn't serve any purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Sabarwal. I really hope that people in Pakistan read this book, people in India read this book. It is an important contribution.
Thank
Uh,
you.
you have spent years in Pakistan, you've seen it with your own eyes, experienced it, lived with people. So, what you were saying here is important for the Indian government to read and listen to, and definitely for Pakistanis in the security strategic community to also listen to. Thank you so much for sharing your time today,
Yeah.
and I hope that while we talk about aid in Pakistan, while we talk of external help, people in Pakistan also think very carefully about trade in the region in South Asia and definitely with India. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Dr. Siddiqa. Thank you very much.